Assalamualaikum, salam hormat, anda menyaksikan Niaga AWANI bersama saya Harits Asyraf. Berbaki lebih kurang dalam 10 hari lagi sebelum kita menyaksikan pembentangan Belanjawan 2026. Banyak yang saya akan bawakan perkembangan sepanjang 1 jam 30 minit ini, terutamanya untuk melihat dari segi angka-angka dan juga data statistik dan juga apa mungkin yang akan mencorak kepada Belanjawan 2026 yang akan dibentangkan oleh Perdana Menteri dan juga Menteri Keuangan pada 10 Oktober nanti di Dewan Rakyat. Okey, baik. Saya nak bawakan satu angka dan juga data yang cukup penting yang dikeluarkan oleh DOSM, di mana DOSM memaklumkan berkenaan dengan jangka hayat rakyat Malaysia. Ini adalah data yang cukup penting untuk kita fahami, terutamanya tak kala Malaysia sedang menuju kepada sebuah negara tua, di mana jangkaan hayat penduduk Malaysia terus meningkat pada 2025 dengan bayi yang dilahirkan pada tahun ini dijangka hidup hingga 75.3 tahun, di mana ianya dilaporkan oleh DOSM semalam, di mana Ketua Perangkawan Datuk Seri Dr. Muhammad Uzir Mahidin berkata berdasarkan penerbitan Jadual Hayat Ringkas Malaysia 2023-2025 yang dikeluarkan semalam, secara puratanya bayi perempuan yang lahir pada 2025 dijangka boleh hidup hingga 77.9 tahun, 4.8 tahun lebih lama berbanding bayi lelaki pada 73.1 tahun. Ini adalah data dan juga angka yang cukup penting untuk kita telitikan dari segi jangkaan hayat rakyat Malaysia. Dengan 2025, estimate di sini hanyalah di peringkat jangkaan ataupun anggaran sahaja. Okey, seperti yang saya maklumkan tadi, peningkatan untuk 2025, kalau kita lihat tahun ke tahun, daripada 74 naik 74.9 ataupun 75, sekarang 75.3, peningkatan yang boleh dikatakan agak signifikan dari segi peningkatan umur 1.3 tahun. Okey. Ini perubahan dari segi jantina, kalau kita nak bandingkan perubahan daripada usia mengikut tahun kelahiran dan pecahan kepada jantina. Okey, wanita ataupun perempuan sentiasa mendahului dari segi angkanya, sekitar pada 2015 iaitu 77.1 tahun umurnya. Okey, kemudian sedikit menurun 76. Sama juga untuk lelaki sekitar 71.5, 71.8 dan akhir sekali 77.9, dan untuk lelaki biru di sini 73.1. Okey. Seterusnya, okey, lelaki dan perempuan 74.9 tahun, 2024 anggarannya adalah 74.5 dan ataupun purata 74.5, dengan lelaki 72.3 tahun, 2024 purata adalah 72 tahun dan perempuan 77.7 tahun, dengan purata 2024 adalah 77.3. Alright, secara global ini Malaysia, secara global dan juga bukan warga negara, kita anggarkan sekitar 82.1 tahun purata untuk kedua-dua jantina, dengan lelaki 81.8 tahun dan perempuan 82.6 tahun. Okey. Okey, ini adalah pecahan mengikut etnik. Sedikit saya nak bawakan kepada anda untuk memahami konteksnya. Etnik Cina sebenarnya, okey, kalau kita dapat lihat di sini, okey, etnik Cina mencatatkan jangkaan hayat ketika lahir tertinggi pada 2025 berbanding dengan etnik yang lain, iaitu 74.6 tahun, okey, dan 80.6 di sini adalah untuk perempuan. Kalau dibandingkan yang warna kuning ini adalah tahun 2024, purata 2024 80.2 naik kepada 80.6 untuk perempuan Cina. Okey, selain daripada itu, ini antara perkara-perkara yang menarik untuk saya bawakan ataupun sekilas pandang lah. 15 tahun, okey. Lelaki dan perempuan 61.1 tahun, okey. Untuk pecahan lelaki sekitar umurnya 58 tahun, perempuan 63. Dengan berusia 60 tahun, kalau kita lihat 20.1 tahun untuk lelaki ataupun untuk kedua-dua jantina, lelaki 18 tahun, perempuan 21.6 tahun. Okey. Lelaki yang berumur 60 tahun pada 2025 dijangka hidup selama 18.8 tahun lagi, dan perempuan selama 21.6 tahun lagi. Okey. Ini hanya di peringkat jangkaan dan juga pengiraan ataupun dari segi purata serta anggaran. Lelaki yang berumur 65 tahun pada 2025 dijangka hidup selama 15.3 tahun lagi dan perempuan selama 17.6 tahun. Okey. Dari segi purata ataupun jangkaan hayat ataupun jangkaan hayat ketika lahir, pecahan ikut negeri, purata Malaysia secara keseluruhannya angka yang tadi ni, okey, untuk kedua-dua jantina 75.3, tapi Selangor, Kuala Lumpur, Labuan dan Sarawak di atas purata nasional. Okey, melebihi 75.3, sekitar 78, 76, 76.1, 75.4. Dan terendah adalah kalau kita lihat jangka usia yang lahir tahun ini adalah 72.6 tahun, iaitu bagi di Terengganu dengan lelaki 70.3, perempuan 75 tahun. Okey, ini adalah pecahan ikut negeri dengan anggaran untuk tahun 2025. Alright. 3 negara ASEAN sebenarnya. Okey, kita nak bandingkan ikut negara-negara pula. 3 negara ASEAN mencatatkan jangkaan hayat melebihi paras Malaysia. Okey, Malaysia tadi 74.9, yang melebihi usia Malaysia adalah Singapura teratas, Thailand dan juga Brunei. Dengan Singapura tertinggi 83.5, Thailand 76.6, Brunei 75.5. Yang lain-lain Vietnam, Indonesia, Cambodia, Filipina, Laos dan Myanmar masing-masing di bawah 74, sekitar dalam Myanmar adalah terendah 67. Okey. Ini adalah perbandingan dengan negara-negara terpilih lah. Kita tahu kenapa Jepun sentiasa berada di hadapan. Jepun sebuah negara tua dan mungkin juga sedang menuju super aging. Pakar kita mungkin boleh kita discuss sekejap lagi. Jepun sedang menuju super aging country, 84.9. Dengan secara keseluruhannya, Malaysia masih lagi tahap usianya masih lagi 74.9 ini masih lagi berada di bawah ataupun di bawah sekitar 10 tahun di bawah Jepun kalau kita bandingkan dengan negara-negara yang lain seperti Korea, Australia, Sweden, Iceland dan juga beberapa negara yang lain. Macam US sekitar dalam 80 tahun, China 78 tahun, India 72 tahun. Okey. Ini antara angka dan juga data terpilih untuk saya bawakan kepada anda dan sudah tentu kita nak terus fokus berkenaan dengan perkara ini serta melihat adakah Malaysia ini sebenarnya bersedia untuk menjadi sebuah negara tua dan bagaimana Belanjawan 2026 perlu memenuhi keperluan serta kehendak perubahan demografi yang berlaku di Malaysia. Profesor Madya Dr. Rahimah Ibrahim, Pengarah Institut Pendidikan Penuaan Malaysia dari Universiti Putra Malaysia bersama dengan saya. Doktor, saya dah bawakan banyak angka-angka dan juga data daripada DOSM ini. Adakah pertama sekali dalam nak memulakan perbincangan kita, adakah pertambahan usia ini sudah dijangka terutamanya oleh My Aging UPM sendiri dan adakah kita bersedia untuk menjadi negara tua ini, Doktor?
Okay, baiklah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh dan selamat pagi. Terima kasih Encik Harits Asyraf dan pihak Astro AWANI yang telah menjemput kami, My Aging ataupun Institut Penyelidikan Penuaan Malaysia di UPM. Kebetulan Encik Asyraf, hari ini adalah Hari Warga Emas Sedunia.
Ya.
Dan Pertubuhan Bangsa-Bangsa Bersatu menetapkan temanya tahun ini sebagai akses kita perlu sama rata dan dunia kita yang juga sedang menunggu kan. Yeah. Jadi tema ni betul-betul menekankan hak warga emas terhadap kesihatan, penjagaan, penyertaan dalam semua aspek dalam masyarakat lah ya. Sambil kita menangani jurang apa-apa jurang yang ketidaksamarataan yang semakin melebar dengan usia kita. Jadi saya nak highlight juga di sini pagi ni ya. Kita kena ubah kita punya mindset ataupun set minda kita daripada tengok penuaan ni daripada beban kepada dividen hayat yang semakin meningkat. Ya, kita lihat dia sebagai satu dividen ya. Jadi kita ni hidup lebih lama. Itu bukan kos semata-mata. Itu adalah modal masa. Jadi jangka hayat Malaysia ni kita nampak dia secara purata naik ke 75.3 tahun. Tandanya kita perlu tukar gear dari kepada pencegahan, berfokuskan komuniti dan juga maruah dalam penjagaan. Jadi untuk fokus belanjawan ya, kami di My Aging UPM berharap sangat belanjawan 2026 ni mendahului curve ataupun kelok. Kita perlu bersedia sebelum krisis. Jadi kita perlu panjangkan tahun orang supaya hidup dia sihat. Kurangkan kejutan kepada keluarga dari segi kewangan, terutamanya penjaga yang menjaga warga emas. Dan juga menutup jurang antara wilayah. Kita tengok tadi kan data yang Encik Haris bawakan tadi, ada jurang dari segi penuaan di peringkat wilayah, daerah dan sebagainya.
Ya, Doktor, bagaimana pula kalau kita lihat perubahan, saya boleh sifatkan sebagai perubahan struktur demografi lah dengan peningkatan usianya, tahap kadar kelahiran yang masih lagi rendah ini. Perubahan struktur demografi ini, adakah ianya akan mengubah dari segi landscape negara kalau kita cakap soal saiz tenaga kerja, beban penjagaan, termasuklah keperluan dari segi mungkin dalam sistem kesihatan awam. Pandangan doktor melihat kepada perkara ini?
Okey, jadi betul sekali Encik Asyraf. Jadi kita tengok tadi fakta demografi kan. Ada perubahan kelahiran semakin mengecil, tapi pengalaman warga emas tu kekal besar kan. Kita mesti pegang tu bahawa mereka ni adalah kaya dengan pengalaman. Jadi kita tengok tadi realiti data menunjukkan jangka hayat meningkat. Selangor antara tertinggi. Selangor juga negeri yang paling ramai warga emas. Sabah lebih rendah. Jurang daerah juga besar. Kita tengok Samarahan tadi berbanding daerah paling rendah sekitar pertengahan 60-an. Kalau Samarahan dia dah lebih 80 tahun.
Betul.
Ini bukanlah nasib. Ini adalah disebabkan oleh struktur peluang dan juga akses. Jadi ada implikasi terhadap tenaga kerja, contohnya pertumbuhan pekerja perlahan. Kita perlu kekalkan pekerja yang berpengalaman ya. Pekerja berusia yang berpengalaman secara fleksibel. Mereka boleh jadi mentor, boleh bekerja separa masa, sambil juga kita melihat kepada proses mengotomasikan kerja-kerja yang berat yang tidak lagi mampu dilaksanakan oleh golongan yang berusia. Dan dari segi implikasi kesihatan, kita tengok juga bila kita masih lagi fokus kuratif ataupun rawat bila parah saja, kos akan meletup. Jadi kita perlu alih ke peringkat primary health ataupun peringkat kesihatan prima ya, di peringkat komuniti, kesihatan awam. Jadi kita perlu melaksanakan saringan penyakit yang tidak berjangkit dari segi saringan kognitif, saringan frailty ataupun keuzuran, melihat kepada nutrisi, ya, pemakanan, adakah mereka bergerak, ya, boleh kekal mobile ya, di peringkat komuniti, melihat kepada preskripsi ubat dan juga yang preskripsi ubat kadang-kadang warga emas dia terlampau banyak dapat ubat, dia pun boleh jadi satu polifarmasi ya, isu polifarmasi. Jadi WHO ICOP juga menggariskan secara praktikalnya bahawa kesan awal kemerosotan kapasiti dan pelan penjagaan berpusatkan individu perlu ditekankan dalam kita punya pelan strategik ya.
Doktor, satu lagi perkara saya tidak boleh lari kalau kita bercakap soal menjadi negara tua ini adalah sandwich generation, kerana ini adalah realiti semasa yang perlu kita lalui, dan di mana mungkin penonton di luar sana mungkin yang tak biasa dengan term sandwich generation ini, boleh saya sifatkan sebagai generasi ibaratnya di tengah sandwich itu ya, diapit oleh dua roti. Ada ibu bapa yang mungkin tua dan juga uzur perlu dijaga, dan juga pada masa sama ada anak-anak yang perlu dibesarkan, nutrisinya perlu baik, pendidikannya perlu baik. Bagaimana sebenarnya belanjawan 2026 ini perlu dilihat lebih holistik, bukan sahaja memenuhi keperluan mungkin warga emas, tetapi mungkin generasi sandwich ini sendiri juga perlu diberi dari segi kelonggaran tertentu maupun dari segi insentif tertentu dalam nak memastikan bahawa kesejahteraan itu wujud dalam kalangan rakyat Malaysia ini. Pandangan doktor melihat perkara ini?
Okey, baik Encik Haris. betul sekali yang tentang isu yang dibawakan tentang sandwich generation ya.
Ya.
Realiti penjaga keluarga sekarang, mereka masih merupakan penjaga, kumpulan penjaga terbesar ya bagi golongan warga emas.
Ya.
Tetapi kasih ini perlukan sandaran, perlu disokong oleh pihak kerajaan, komuniti dan juga pihak swasta. Apa yang paling berat ya? Kos langsung dan tidak langsung. Jadi bila nak tak ada koordinasi antara hospital ke komuniti, penjaga boleh mencapai kesan burnout ya, kerana mereka tak ada respite ataupun perkhidmatan yang membolehkan mereka berehat daripada menjaga warga emas ya. Dan mereka juga dari segi latihan masih terhad. Jadi kajian kami menuntut anjakan dasar yang lebih mengiktiraf dan menyokong penjaga secara sistematik. Lagi satu, kita juga fokus kepada halangan akses. Ya. Warga tua dan keluarga ataupun kita lihat secara amnya warga emas ya, dan keluarga mereka berdepan halangan maklumat, kewangan, geografi dan birokrasi untuk kesihatan, sosial dan penjagaan jangka panjang. Ini menyebabkan mereka lewat mendapat rawatan ataupun dia tahap kebergantungan dia lebih tinggi.
Doktor, mungkin berbaki lebih kurang dalam 1 minit 2 minit perbincangan kita ini. Mungkin ada My Aging sendiri, mungkin ada sesi konsultasi dan juga ya sudah tentu ada banyak libat urus dan sebagainya. Apa mungkin respon dan juga kehadapan ini, apa yang perlu disegerakan? Adakah kita perlu dasar negara tua yang lebih holistik, satu dokumen dan perlu dilaksanakan segera? Mungkin ada keperluan tertentu yang perlu disegerakan memasuki tahun 2026, Doktor.
Okay, terima kasih Encik Haris. Jadi secara ringkasnya, kita perlu fokus kepada seperti yang juga terajui oleh Kementerian Wanita, fokus kepada ekonomi penjagaan dan juga lihat kepada peluang-peluang yang boleh dijana melalui ekonomi usia emas. Ya. Jadi yang paling penting dalam ekonomi penjagaan adalah untuk menutup jurang kesihatan dengan komuniti ataupun sosial. Dan kita perlu melihat bagaimana peringkat komuniti itu boleh didaya upayakan ataupun diperkasakan ya, perkhidmatan di peringkat komuniti supaya dia lebih dekat dengan warga emas dan keluarga mereka ya. Contohnya melakukan saringan dan juga latihan kepada penjaga ya, dan bantuan-bantuan sosial yang boleh disalurkan kepada golongan yang memerlukan. Dan pihak berkuasa tempatan juga perlu melihat kepada aspek persekitaran mesra usia ya. Jadi dari segi persekitaran yang membolehkan semua rakyat Malaysia, tak kira umur ataupun keupayaan, dapat akses ke tempat-tempat yang mereka ingin pergi ataupun perlu hadiri ya. Jadi kita perlu design untuk design proof aging proof our design ya, dalam pelan tempatan ya. So kita pun dalam dalam pelaksanaan juga mendekati beberapa kerajaan negeri supaya melihat aspek ini, terutama dalam membangunkan age friendly city and community ya, komuniti mesra usia ataupun bandar dan komuniti mesra usia.
Ya. Doktor, sudah tentu ya, seperti yang doktor sebutkan, kita juga pernah bincangkan berkenaan dengan kami juga pernah bawa topik berkenaan dengan demensia ya. Itu antara perkara yang penting, bagaimana building pejabat-pejabat kerajaan itu juga perlu memenuhi age future proof itu yang disebutkan oleh doktor tadi. Terima kasih Profesor Madya, Dr. Rahimah Ibrahim. InsyaAllah kita akan terus bersiaran, kita akan teliti Belanjawan 2026 dan juga kita akan mengupas dengan lebih lanjut berkenaan dengan perkara ini. Itu dia tadi pengarah Institut Pendidikan Penuaan Malaysia dari Universiti Putra Malaysia. Okey, baik. Bercakap soal belanjawan juga, kami di Astro AWANI menjalankan tinjauan di mana pertanian moden menjadi pilihan utama responden Astro AWANI sebagai sektor masa depan Malaysia. Daripada 115 responden yang terlibat dalam tinjauan suara anda suara Malaysia, 40.87% responden memilih pertanian moden. Sementara itu, 33.91% responden memilih teknologi digital dan kecerdasan buatan AI sebagai sektor masa depan Malaysia. Ini diikuti dengan tenaga hijau dan boleh baru 21.74%, manakala 3.48% responden memilih teknologi keuangan dan aset digital. Astro AWANI membuka ruang kepada rakyat Malaysia untuk bersuara dan berkongsi pandangan menjelang pembentangan Belanjawan 2026. Soalan baru hari ini, petang ini akan dikemaskini setiap 2 hari sehinggalah menjelang sehari sebelum Belanjawan 2026 yang akan dibentangkan pada 10 Oktober nanti. Menjelang Belanjawan 2026, Astro AWANI membuka ruang kepada rakyat Malaysia untuk bersuara dan berkongsi pandangan. Soalan hari ini adalah, apakah keutamaan dalam sektor pendidikan? 4 pilihan jawapan diberikan. Imbas kod QR yang tertera untuk menjawab. Suara anda penting dalam membentuk masa depan Malaysia. Sertai sekarang dan jadilah sebahagian daripada wacana nasional. Suara anda, suara Malaysia. Okey, satu lagi perkara berkenaan dengan belanjawan saya nak bawakan di mana golongan belia Malaysia yang merangkumi hampir 40% daripada populasi negara memainkan peranan penting dalam pembangunan sosioekonomi dan pembentukan dasar negara. Namun menjelang Belanjawan 2026, mereka sebenarnya berdepan pelbagai cabaran yang kompleks dan memerlukan pendekatan dasar yang inklusif dan bersasar. Dan sudah tentu kita nak meneliti perkara ini bersama dengan saya secara dalam talian adalah Syafiq Rizwan Jamaluddin, Ketua Penerangan Majlis Belia Malaysia. Syafiq, terima kasih sudi bersama dengan Astro AWANI. Pertama sekali, mungkin apa aspirasi utama Majlis Belia Malaysia terhadap Belanjawan 2026, khususnya dalam memastikan suara belia didengari dan juga diterjemahkan dalam bentuk dasar serta peruntukan?
Terima kasih Haris dan AWANI niaga menjemput kami pada hari ini untuk berbincang dan memberi sedikit pandangan apa aspirasi Majlis Belia Malaysia dalam Belanjawan 2026 ini, khususnya kepada golongan belia. Pada kami, saban tahun Majlis Belia Malaysia sentiasa menyatakan pandangan supaya Belanjawan setiap tahun ini perlu fokus kepada pembangunan belia secara holistik. Maksudnya dia berkait kepada semua sektor yang terlibat dengan orang muda. Dan kita tak nak bajet yang diumumkan saban tahun kepada orang belia ini yang selalunya dianggap sebagai gula-gula ataupun untuk memberikan sedikit kelegaan yang sedikit, tetapi akhirnya dalam jangka masa panjang yang tidak memberi impak yang baik. Jadi kita harapkan apa yang aspirasi kita telah kita sampaikan pun kepada Yang Amat Berhormat Perdana Menteri melalui Setiausaha Politik di Kementerian Keuangan. Bagi kita harap bahawa kontrak Majlis Belanjawan 2026 ini, kita harap ia bukan sekadar angka fiskal yang diumumkan berapa juta kepada belia, berapa juta kepada orang pendidikan, berapa juta untuk orang meniaga, tapi kita harap ianya adalah satu kontrak sosial yang boleh kita ikat dalam satu kerangka workable framework untuk generasi muda. Ianya bukan hanya untuk belia tetapi adalah untuk generasi masa depan yang akan mewarisi keseluruhan apa yang ada dalam negara ini. Jadi ini adalah satu perkara yang amat penting dan harapan kami adalah bahawa ia tidak lagi, belia bukan dilihat lagi hanya sebagai penerima manfaat. Kadang-kadang kita orang belia selalu dikata sangat lemah, hanya menunggu peluang dan menunggu bantuan daripada kerajaan, tetapi kita ingin bersama-sama sebagai rakan strategik, sebagai golongan yang akan menggerakkan bersama-sama kerajaan bersama-sama negara ini dengan kerangka dan bantuan polisi dan dasar yang memberi kebaikan dalam jangka masa yang panjang, bukan sekadar dalam 2026 melalui Belanjawan 1 tahun, tapi ianya perlu diterjemah dalam polisi yang lebih panjang dan akan memberi kesan yang lebih baik.
Ya, Syafiq, salah satu perkara yang kita tidak boleh lari adalah isu gaji bermaruah yang sering sekali kita dengar perbualan dalam kalangan belia. Pada pandangan MBM sendiri, apa mungkin langkah yang perlu diambil kerajaan melalui Belanjawan 2026 untuk menjamin gaji belia ini setimpal dengan kos sara hidup semasa, terutama yang tinggal dan juga bekerja di tengah kota raya Kuala Lumpur sebagai contoh, Johor Bahru, Pulau Pinang yang kosnya cukup tinggi ini. Syafiq, ya.
Betul. Dari dalam segi isu gaji bermaruah dan gaji minimum, gaji progresif yang kita sentiasa bincangkan selama tahun, kerajaan pun dah come out dengan dasar gaji progresif, gaji minimum dan lain-lain. Bagi kita di peringkat Majlis Belia Malaysia yang sering memperjuangkan berkaitan dengan gaji bermaruah orang belia ini, bagi kita bukan sahaja perlu setimpal ataupun selari dengan kenaikan inflasi ataupun kenaikan kos sara hidup dan lain-lain. Bagi kita ia adalah satu polisi yang akan menjamin kesejahteraan, bukan sahaja kesejahteraan ekonomi orang belia, tetapi dia akan menjamin kesejahteraan sosial orang belia dan masyarakat komuniti rakyat secara meluasnya. Bagi kita yang paling penting sekarang ni yang kita lihat adalah bagaimana ianya gaji bermaruah ini ia perlu bersangkutan dengan kemahiran, ilmu yang yang ada pada warga belia dan juga kemahiran skill-skill tambahan yang lain ni yang perlu juga untuk dijadikan sebagai faktor dalam menaikkan gaji ataupun gaji bermaruah ini. Kita tengok saban tahun walaupun gaji itu semakin ada yang meningkat, ada ataupun kita dah letak gaji progresif, tetapi isu ni ialah kadang-kadang market di luar sana, industri di luar sana ianya tidak setimpal dan selari dengan kebolehan ataupun kemahiran ataupun orang-orang muda ni lah kan. Jadi ada yang belajar sampai master, PhD, tapi akhirnya di industri peluang pekerjaan tu tidak ada dan akhirnya mereka terpaksa pergi kepada pekerjaan-pekerjaan yang hanya menawarkan gaji minimum dan gaji bermaruah yang mungkin tidak setimpal pun dengan kelayakan yang ada orang belia. Jadi ini adalah isu-isu gaji bermaruah yang kita sedang lihat, bukan sahaja perlu setimpal dan selari dengan kenaikan inflasi ataupun ekonomi semasa, tapi ia perlu juga setimpal dengan kelayakan dan juga kebolehan orang muda. Secara tidak langsung ia akan menjadi faktor kepada orang muda ini berlumba untuk memperkasa dan membangunkan diri dia sebab dia tahu bahawa mereka ada kebolehan dan negara mampu untuk memberikan gaji-gaji yang lebih baik di masa akan datang.
Ya. Syafiq, salah satu perkara kalau kita bercakap soal gaji, kenalah kerja dulu baru kita boleh cakap soal gaji.
Betul.
Bercakap soal kerja ini juga, tadi Syafiq dah menyentuh sedikit berkenaan dengan mungkin upskill dan juga reskill. Bagaimana pula melihat, meneliti dari segi inisiatif kerajaan melibatkan sebagai contoh TVET kita lihat cabaran digital dan juga automasi ini semakin meluas, semakin pantas dan juga kerajaan sedang berusaha untuk membuka ruang yang luas di bidang TVET, memberi pekerjaan yang jauh lebih baik di industri-industri tertentu. Bagaimana Syafiq melihat bahawa proses upskill, reskill, TVET ini perlu terus diperkasa dalam Belanjawan 2026 untuk menggarap minat golongan belia yang mungkin pendidikan formal itu mungkin kurang sedikit bagi mereka, tapi mereka melihat bahawa TVET adalah cahaya yang baru untuk kehidupan mereka ini. Syafiq.
Saya rasa ini akhirnya kita akan jatuh dalam mangkuk yang sama pada masa dulu bahawa mereka yang tidak suka belajar ni masuk ke jurusan vocational atau teknik. Dan akhirnya kita juga beranggapan begitu mainstream akademik ini tak bagus, so semua pergi ke TVET. Jadi kita tak nak perkara ini berlaku dan menjadikan ini satu normal baru di masa hadapan. Kerana apa? Kerana kita perlu melihat TVET ini adalah sebagai satu industri ataupun pekerjaan masa hadapan. Yang sudah tentu pekerjaan masa hadapan ini dia lebih sophisticated, dia lebih technology driven dan dia lebih kepada bidang-bidang yang inovasi. Dan ini pastinya yang masalah kepada kita adalah terdapat jurang dalam segi pendidikan yang ditawarkan di peringkat institusi pendidikan dan juga di peringkat market, industri. Itu belum lagi kita cerita tentang jurang antara bandar luar bandar ataupun jurang penawaran pekerjaan dari segi aspek mekatronik, yang elektronik dan yang lain-lain berbanding kepada TVET yang masih lagi menggunakan teknologi, bukanlah teknologi lama kita cakap, maksudnya kemahiran yang masih lagi yang tradisional, contohnya kimpalan, automotif dan lain-lain. Sebab kehadapan ini diperlukan kepada digital dan juga digital dan automasi yang seperti yang Harits cakap tadi.
Betul.
Dan perkara-perkara ini memerlukan kepada kelompok-kelompok yang bukan sahaja bukan kerana dia tak nak belajar di peringkat mainstream, tapi kita perlukan orang yang ada scientific thinking, inovasi thinking, dan inilah perkara yang akan membentuk struktur masyarakat pada masa akan datang. Jadi saya harap kita jangan lagi terperangkap dalam kerangka TVET ini adalah peluang baru di masa depan, betul, tetapi ianya bukanlah kepada jalan kedua, tetapi dia adalah jalan utama yang perlu melibatkan kesemuanya, orang belia, baik yang di peringkat ke depan ataupun yang tertinggal di belakang.
Ya, Syafiq, kalau bercakap soal sudah tentu contohnya kalau automotif tu bukan lagi membaiki enjin dan sebagainya, tapi mungkin mereka cipta bateri EV sebagai contoh, ya. Ini antara HGHV, high growth high value, peluang yang mungkin boleh dilihat oleh golongan muda. Kita berbaki lebih kurang dalam seminit dua ini. Syafiq, mungkin bagaimana sebenarnya pandangan ataupun cadangan di peringkat MBM sendirilah untuk melihat bahawa Belanjawan 2026 ini bukan sahaja membantu belia tetapi juga sebagai penerima manfaat, tetapi juga adalah mengiktiraf belia sebagai rakan strategik dalam proses perancangan dan juga pelaksanaan dasar negara ini, Syafiq.
Betul. Pertamanya kita harap bahawa bajet 2026 ini bukan sahaja bajet 26, malah semua polisi yang digariskan atau akan dilancarkan oleh kerajaan ini akan sentiasa melibatkan warga belia dari semua kelompok untuk berbincang, dan juga bukan setakat berbincang untuk mendengar pandangan, tetapi ia juga perlu digariskan atas keperluan dan kehendak masa hadapan. Ianya bukan untuk belia pada masa ini, tapi belia-belia kita belia hari ini akan menua. Jadi kita perlu satu polisi, satu belanjawan yang memberi kebaikan dalam jangka masa panjang. Yang pertamanya mungkin kita MBM nak propose bahawa kita untuk belanjawan specifically, kita boleh buat youth budget tracker. Ada penerima manfaatnya, ada berapa banyak dana yang telah digunakan dan telah dikeluarkan, apa dia punya keberkesanan dan kejayaan bajet yang dikeluarkan. Dan ini dan beberapa dana padanan belia yang sudah pun ada tapi boleh ditambah baik. Dan juga yang paling penting kehadapan ini adalah berkaitan tentang digital, informasi, automasi dan juga inovasi. Perkara ini perlu untuk diperkasakan untuk kebaikan masa akan datang, dan juga kita harap pihak kerajaan akan sentiasa refer kepada apa yang diperlukan pada masa akan datang dan apakah kelompok yang akan menerima kesan pada hari ini akan memberikan kebaikan pada masa akan datang. Terima kasih.
Okey, terima kasih saudara Syafiq Rizwan Jamaluddin. InsyaAllah kita akan terus bersiaran dari semasa ke semasa. Itu dia Syafiq Rizwan Jamaluddin, Ketua Penerangan Majlis Belia Malaysia, berkongsi pandangan beliau berkait dengan menjelang Belanjawan 2026. Masih lagi kita bercakap soal Belanjawan di mana Persatuan Pengangkutan Udara Antarabangsa AYATA berharap Belanjawan 2026 akan mengemukakan langkah bagi memperkukuh industri penerbangan Malaysia yang menekankan peranannya sebagai penyumbang penting kepada ekonomi negara dan sektor pelancongan. Memetik laporan bernama, Naib Presiden Serantau AYATA Asia Pasifik, Sheldon He berkata penerbangan merupakan penyumbang penting kepada ekonomi Malaysia.
Sebab itu katanya dasar yang dipertimbangkan perlu menganalisis dan mengelakkan sebarang kesan negatif ke atas syarikat penerbangan serta penumpang, terutamanya cukai, levy atau apa pembayaran yang berkaitan dengan langkah keselamatan selain kawalan sempadan. Industri tersebut menyumbang sebanyak $14.4 bilion atau lebih kurang 68.1 bilion ringgit kepada ekonomi Malaysia setiap tahun dan menyokong lebih 650,000 pekerjaan termasuk 100,000 yang bekerja secara langsung dalam sektor penerbangan. He berkata kedudukan kukuh Malaysia sebagai hub perjalanan antarabangsa bergantung kepada dasar yang membolehkan kecekapan dan daya saing. Beliau turut menekankan kos operasi yang lebih tinggi boleh memberi kesan kepada syarikat penerbangan, penumpang dan akhirnya hubungan Malaysia dengan dunia. Mengenai kelestarian, beliau berkata penghantaran bahan api penerbangan lestari SAF campuran tempatan pertama oleh Petronas merupakan perkembangan yang dialu-alukan untuk industri itu. Katanya AYATA berhubung dengan kerajaan mengenai rancangan untuk memperkenalkan dasar SAF yang kukuh pada 2027 seiring dengan usaha global bagi mengurangkan karbon dalam penerbangan. Beliau menambah AYATA mengemukakan 6 cadangan dasar untuk pertimbangan dalam Belanjawan 2026. Cadangan-cadangan itu termasuk memastikan dasar yang stabil boleh diramalkan dan menyokong tenaga boleh baharu serta pengeluaran bahan api selain cukup fleksibel bagi menangani kesan sampingan yang tidak dijangka. Cadangan lain iaitu memastikan ketelusan harga SAF, memberikan kepastian kepada syarikat penerbangan untuk menuntut manfaat alam sekitar daripada SAF serta mengelak daripada memperkenalkan mandat SAF sebagai langkah bersendirian tanpa insentif membantu merapatkan jurang harga dengan bahan api konvensional.
Di dalam setiap berita yang dibawa, konteks amat penting. Cara kita mendapat berita kian berubah. Melalui media sosial maupun saluran digital yang lain serta kaca TV. Kami sentiasa membawakan yang tergempar dan terkini.
Kita buat sesuatu yang berbeza.
Teraskan acuan verifikasi yang diamalkan supaya setiap fakta adalah sahih. Daripada analisis pelbagai sudut yang mendalam, laporan-laporan khas dan perbincangan yang membina negara. Inklusif, suara rakyat kami ajukan. Keseimbangan persepsi kami pastikan. Kerana setiap cerita mempunyai impak yang tersendiri dan perlu dibawa dengan penelitian yang terperinci. Pastikan Astro AWANI menjadi pilihan anda tidak kira di mana sahaja anda berada. Saluran berita paling dipercayai di Malaysia.
Pasukan terhebat bangkit sekali lagi dengan satu misi.
Gets the shot in and scores. Oh yes.
Demi mengukir legasi di pentas tertinggi Asia.
Fantastic.
Kehebatan bukanlah diberi, tetapi ia diperjuangkan. AFC Champions League ini secara langsung di Astro.
Tariffs on imports of products from China reaching up to 145%.
Tariffs on the rest of the world are sitting at 10%, with the potential for reciprocal tariffs to be reimposed within 90 days.
Kunjungan rasmi Presiden China ke Malaysia ini menunjukkan komitmen kedua-dua negara untuk meningkatkan hubungan diplomatik ke tahap yang lebih strategik.
Baik, bertemu kembali. Kumpulan Penerbangan Malaysia MAG menyambut ulang tahun ke-10 dengan hala tuju lebih berani, termasuk kerjasama digital bersama gegasi teknologi global dan perluasan operasi baru. Menurut Ketua Pegawai Operasi Malaysia Airlines Kapten Nasaruddin A. Bakar, pelaburan dalam teknologi bukan sahaja penting untuk meningkatkan hasil rakyat, malah memastikan operasi kumpulan berjalan lebih cekap.
Today is our 10th year of MAG. Now we are carrying approximately about 40,000 passengers a year. In a year, we carry about 14 to 15 million passengers, depending on the years that we fly. Today, in the year of 2025, we are forecasting approximately 15 million passengers that we carry.
Tambahnya antara nama besar yang telah dimeterai termasuk Google dan Skyscanner bagi memperluaskan capaian pelanggan serta menjana pertumbuhan pendapatan. MAG turut mengembangkan bahagian cateringnya. Menjelang 2029, sebuah kompleks mega antara yang terbesar di Asia dijangka siap dengan kapasiti menyediakan 50,000 hidangan sehari, hampir 2 kali ganda daripada keupayaan semasa. Perluasan itu dijangka menyokong sepenuhnya rangkaian Malaysia Airlines sambil menawarkan lebihan kapasiti kepada syarikat penerbangan lain. Langkah itu hadir selepas tamatnya kerjasama dengan Brahims. Dalam tempoh hanya sebulan, MAG berjaya menyusun semula operasi catering termasuk melabur dalam truk pengangkat khas dan sistem baharu. Dengan kerjasama digital yang lebih kukuh, sasaran penumpang rekod serta perluasan catering berskala besar, MAG kini berada di landasan yang memperkukuhkan operasi menuju tahun 2030.
Hanya dalam tempoh 4 hari, hampir 3 juta rakyat telah menikmati subsidi petrol melalui program Budi Madani 95. Menteri Kewangan kedua Datuk Seri Amir Hamzah Azizan berkata, nilai jualan mencecah kira-kira 91 juta ringgit dengan rakyat membeli RON 95 pada harga subsidi RM1.99 seliter.
Jadi insyaAllah kalau kita masuk program pilot yang kita buat, hari Sabtu dengan anggota polis dan tentera. Kita buka pada STR pada hari Ahad, Isnin. Hari ini 4 hari dah. Kesemua jumlah pengguna budi 95 sekarang dah hampir 3 juta orang dengan jualannya hampir 91 juta ringgit mendapat subsidi untuk program ini.
Menurut beliau, setakat jam 6 petang Selasa, lebih 2 juta pengguna telah mengisi minyak dan menikmati subsidi yang disediakan kerajaan. Mengulas kebimbangan pemilik bot enjin sangkut khususnya di Sabah dan Sarawak, Amir Hamzah menegaskan kerajaan turut memastikan golongan itu layak menikmati manfaat sama.
Yang kedua, kita juga ada mendengar daripada mereka yang ada bot dengan enjin sangkut yang mereka risau yang mereka tak dapat subsidi. Dari segi dasarnya, dari segi kajian, kita bersetuju untuk mereka mendapat kelayakan untuk budi 95 dengan tahap kelayakan yang akan ditentukan. Jadi kita sedang berbincang dengan Kerajaan Negeri Sabah dan Sarawak di mana data-data daripada pemilik bot ini akan dimasukkan dalam sistem budi di mana mereka akan juga mendapat kelayakan yang sepatutnya.
Selain itu, katanya kerajaan turut memberi perhatian kepada pemandu e-hailing dan p-hailing yang bimbang kota subsidi tidak mencukupi.
Jadi dari segi MOF, kita ada menggunakan proses di mana kita menyemak dengan company-company e-hailing dengan p-hailing. Kita tengok bulan lalu berapa banyak penggunaannya. Ya, daripada penggunaan yang data kita ada, kita akan menetapkan kota. Dan kota itu akan bergerak mengikut kegunaan seorang.
Beliau berkata demikian selepas melakukan tinjauan di stesen minyak Petronas Sri Hartamas pada Selasa.
Insiden gangguan transaksi pembelian petrol RON 95 menerusi inisiatif Budi Madani RON 95 di stesen minyak Petron di Pasir Gudang, Johor berpunca daripada gangguan sambungan Wi-Fi di kawasan tersebut, di mana Petron Malaysia Refining and Marketing Berhad Petron dalam kenyataan memaklumkan insiden melibatkan seorang pelanggan itu adalah kes terpencil dan pelan kesinambungan perniagaan telah diaktifkan bagi menangani situasi terbabit. Pihaknya telah menawarkan bantuan kepada pelanggan yang terjejas dan bagi mereka yang menerima bantuan transaksi diteruskan pada harga subsidi RM1.99 seliter bagi yang layak. Katanya isu tersebut adalah terpencil apabila semua stesen lain beroperasi seperti biasa. Pihaknya juga akan terus memastikan urusan pelanggan berjalan lancar. Petron turut menasihati pelanggan yang mengalami sebarang isu menghubungi Petron Care melalui talian 1300-228-211 atau email ke petroncare@petron.com.my untuk mendapatkan bantuan. Di mana pada Selasa, tular video melalui media sosial memaparkan seorang pelanggan mengalami gangguan transaksi ketika berurusan di stesen minyak Petron di Pasir Gudang. The International Air Transport Association IATA has registered a 4.6% growth in total global passenger demand, measured in revenue passenger kilometers RPK for August this year. Its Director General Willie Walsh said the year-on-year growth set a new record for the 2025 peak northern summer travel season.
Planes were operating with more seats filled than ever, with a record load factor of 86%, he said in the statement today. Despite economic uncertainties and geopolitical tensions, the global growth trend shows no signs of abating. October schedules with airlines are planning 3.4% more capacity. He said airlines are doing their best to meet travel demand by maximizing efficiency, making it even more critical for the aerospace manufacturing sector to sort out its supply chain challenges. The aviation body said international demand rose 6.6% in August 2025 compared to the same month a year ago, and load factor reached a historic high. International traffic was by far the dominant driver of growth, accounting for 87% of the net increase in the global RPK in August. Asia Pacific Airlines achieved a 9.8% year-on-year increase in demand. Capacity increased 9.5% year-on-year, and the load factor was 85.1%. IATA report that the growth was driven by strong demand from China and Japan.
Consumption vouchers worth over 480 million yuan in total have been issued in many places around China for a culture and tourism promotion month ahead of the 8-day National Day and Mid-Autumn Festival holiday, which starts from Wednesday. Over 29,000 cultural and tourism events are set to take place across the country to offer a diversified and more convenient travel experience to holidaymakers and at the same time help them save money.
With the third Beijing Urban Regeneration Week launch on Sunday, residents in the Chinese capital will have the opportunity to go shopping in special markets and participate in art events from September 28th to October 8th. This year's Urban Regeneration Week features a wide range of scenarios of shopping, cultural activities and sport events, with 5 million yuan in consumption vouchers released for consumers from online platforms. Zhejiang province in East China will hand out vouchers worth 47.75 million yuan for culture and tourism of the season. The province has also launched special travel routes, and 100 scenic areas across the province are to offer price cuts to tourists. In Northeast China's Dalian City, Liaoning Province musical festival are held for the holiday, and a total of 15 million yuan will be offered in vouchers. In Huangshan City, an iconic tourism attraction in East China's Anhui Province, tourists can enjoy price cuts with their plane or high-speed train ticket stops.
President Donald Trump on Tuesday said Pfizer will cut the price on all of its prescription drugs sold to the Medicaid insurance program and will introduce all new prescription drugs at a most favored nation price. The White House is also planning to unveil a direct-to-consumer website for Americans to buy drugs called Trump RX, and official added Pfizer will launch sales of some of its drugs directly to consumers through that website.
Trump sent letters to 17 leading drug companies in July telling them to slash drug prices to match those paid overseas, a policy the president has called most favored nation pricing. He asked them to respond with binding commitments by September 29th.
Pfizer is committing, as will other drug companies as we go through the weeks. But Pfizer is truly one of the biggest in the world and one of the greatest in the world. Today, Pfizer is committing to offer all of their prescription medications to Medicaid, and it will be at the most favored nation's prices. It's going to have a huge impact on bringing Medicaid costs down like nothing else.
Pfizer is the first company to announce a deal.
Meanwhile, Pfizer CEO Albert Bourla described the deal as historic, commits Pfizer to offering all its medications to Medicaid at most favored nation pricing, matching the lowest prices paid by other wealthy nations. The agreement also includes a commitment from Pfizer to relocate the production of US consumer medicine currently manufactured overseas.
Bourla confirmed that the company is ready to unleash its investment portfolio domestically, supported by a 3-year grace period exempting Pfizer from Section 232 tariffs contingent on moving production to the US.
So it's an historic day because I think today we are turning the tide and we are reversing an unfair situation. For years, other rich nations refused to pay the fair share for the medical innovation, and as a result, Americans had to assume disproportional cost on their shoulders. By this agreement that we did, we commit to onshore the production of our medicines that are consumed in the US and are made outside the US. And for that, we are ready to unleash our investment portfolio in this country. And the President graciously gave us a 3 years grace period that we will not be subject to the 232 tariffs as long as, of course, we move the products here.
US patients currently pay by far the most for prescription medicines, often nearly 3 times more than in other developed nations, and Trump has been pressuring drug makers to lower their prices to what patients pay elsewhere. The US has been engaged in one-on-one talks with companies, Kennedy Jr. said at a cabinet meeting last month, adding that Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick was using a threat to tariffs on the industry for additional leverage. The launch prices of drugs in the United States have been rising significantly in recent years. Many new medications enter the market at annual prices in hundreds of thousands of dollars, leading to questions about whether patient benefits are worth the cost. A Reuters analyst found that US prices for newly launched pharmaceutical more than doubled last year to a median of $370,000 compared to $180,000 in 2021.
A potential US government shutdown threatens to disrupt critical federal services and exacerbate existing challenges in recruiting and retaining federal employees. National Federation of Federal Employees President Randy Irwin said on Tuesday, citing years of workforce reductions and strained morale under the Trump administration. Irwin criticized the administration's treatment of federal employees, citing intimidation, termination and political interference as factors undermining morale and recruitment.
The looming shutdown set to begin at midnight on Tuesday if lawmakers fail to pass a stopgap spending bill would furlough hundreds of thousands of federal workers deemed non-essential and halt operations across numerous agencies, including the Internal Revenue Service, the Pentagon, and federal courts.
Well, the American people really benefit from having a talented, highly qualified federal workforce. It already is a tremendous challenge to be able to recruit and retain the necessary talent that we need to do all the important work. Federal employees make 25% less than people in the private sector doing the exact same jobs, which puts the federal government at a real disadvantage. But increasingly, with this administration, I think people have seen that they are not showing respect to the federal workforce. They're insulting them, intimidating them, firing them, just messing with them in all kinds of ways. And when that we are doing damage to our ability to recruit and retain the talent that we need in this government for decades to come, because people will remember being disrespected in this way. People don't want to sit in a constant state of agitation or being fired for doing their jobs, being fired because somebody knows what your politics are. There are political witch hunts happening in this government that never happened before. And so they're not, when that happens, they're not serving the American people, they're serving their political interests or what have you. And, it's going to be hard to convince a whole generation of people that would want to work for the American people, do health research to solve cancer and Alzheimer's, or to be a part of NASA, or all kinds of amazing things that is done in the federal government. You're not going to be able to convince those people to work for the federal government when the bad things that are happening right now continue to happening. And a government shutdown like this, it's just putting another log on that fire. And I worry about the future of our civil service because of what's being done in this administration.
The shutdown would also disrupt the publication of key U.S. economic data, including employment and GDP reports, and affect agencies responsible for approving small business loans and disaster recovery funding. Essential services such as Social Security payments, air traffic control, and border security would continue, although many workers would do so without pay.
Safe food, safe air travel.
Wall Street's 3 major indexes managed to close Tuesday choppy session higher, also marking quarterly and monthly gains even as investors brace for US government shutdown, which would delay key economic reports and muddy the Federal Reserve interest rate policy outlook. While Tuesday's gains were modest, the benchmark and S&P 500 and the tech-heavy Nasdaq and the Dow all gained for the second quarter in a row. For the S&P 500 and the Dow, it also marked their fifth straight monthly gain, while the Nasdaq registered its sixth straight monthly gain. US President Donald Trump warned congressional Democrats on Tuesday that allowing the federal government to shut down at midnight would allow his administration to take irreversible actions, including shutting down programs important to them. While previous shutdowns have had a limited impact on markets, some analysts warn that this time could be more disruptive given the delicate economic backdrop.
The markets today, once again, are showing a lot of resilience in the face of a potential government shutdown. I think it's signaling the market just doesn't feel it's going to happen. Again, you have two sides playing a serious game of chicken. We'll see who pulls out if someone does. If they don't, we probably will have some headline risk going down. But for now, again, market showing pretty strong resilience going forward like they have throughout the whole year. Typically, we've never seen in shutdowns firing people. Furlough, yes, and that could happen. As far as more market jitters as a result, this is really Trump calling out the Democrats and saying, look, I'm willing to go to the mat on this one. I think it's more of a negotiating tactic. We don't believe there'll be mass firings. And as far as how long the government shutdown will be, he's already proven he's not afraid to shut down the government. He did it at the end of 18 into 19 for the longest time period. It was 35 days. Before that was Clinton, 21 days. So he's willing to do it. As far as firings, no, we don't see it. And I think more market volatility due to firings. I think it provides just a lot of good talk, but not more market volatility as a result.
Okey, baik, kita berhenti rehat seketika. Selepas ini laporan ekonomi oleh WAF.
When the superpowers move, the ground shifts. Power isn't just about might anymore. It's about narratives, networks, negotiation. We go beyond the noise to deliver laser-focused analysis on how power moves and what it means for the world. This is AWANI International, reporting the shifts in power affairs shaping the world.
Ayahku tu patutnya dah lama mati kat tadi jatuh kat penjara tu, tahu tak? Dia ayah. Tak ada lagi mopok. Cari anak, minta maaf.
Anak-anak learning, dia dah besar lain.
Saya anggap ayah ni hero saya. Tapi bila fikir-fikir balik, bodoh punya saya.
Aku sebenarnya ada aja.
We're kind of moving from episodic shocks to more of a new operating regime. You know, one that is defined now by persistent disruption. And that's a critical word here, persistent. This disruption is not going to end.
Welcome to Radio Davos. This week, we're looking at the global economy because the World Economic Forum has just published its chief economist outlook. And to discuss that with me, his name is Wayne Best. He's the chief economist at Visa.
The global economy has shown, pretty remarkable resilience this year. But even still, the outlook remains pretty weak. And risks, unfortunately, I think are firmly skewed to the downside. We're not saying there's a recession, just we're going to have to start recalibrating ourselves to the potential growth rates. Companies and economies are going to need to react, and they're going to have to move rapidly to stay ahead of these changes that are happening. As one of the chief economists reflected, we're not just weathering storms now. We got to start redrawing the map.
Hello, Wayne. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us. The Chief Economist Outlook, to any listeners or viewers to this podcast, is based on a survey that World Economic Forum does to get a snapshot of what these experts around the world think the global economy is doing right now. Let's see your take on it, Wayne. Uncertainty, I think, is one of the main takeaways. Tell us about global uncertainty when it comes to the economy.
Well, I think the uncertainty factor really started to accelerate with the change of the administration in the United States. People started to get very, very concerned about, you know, how should I invest? How should I move my business forward? And consumers also had that type of uncertainty also. You know, uncertainty is something that is very difficult for people to manage. People can take bad news. Businesses can take bad news, but uncertainty in many cases can be a death knell. I say that because, you know, do I want to invest in a $1 or $1 billion factory when the rules of the road start to change the next time we get together? We know that some of the changes in tariffs, for example, will create tremendous amounts of uncertainty here and around the world. So uncertainty, yes, I think is very top of the list. And both businesses and consumers are looking for that uncertainty to really start to be removed in order to make better business decisions as they move forward.
I've got some of the key figures that you've identified from the report. Do you want to talk us through those?
Yeah, I think the first one is really kind of trying to figure out how to adapt to that uncertainty. Let's start with the big picture. The global economy has shown, you know, pretty remarkable resilience this year. But even still, the outlook remains pretty weak. And risks, unfortunately, I think are firmly skewed to the downside. As one of the chief economists that was included in the survey said, we're not just weathering storms, we're kind of redrawing the map. In fact, about 72% or 3/4 of the chief economists expect the global economy to be a little weaker or much weaker in the coming year. There's a lot of expectation, almost 8 out of 10 that anticipate the geoeconomic fragmentation will start to intensify with trade tensions at the heart of this shift overall. There is, you know, some benefit here that we're going to see with regards to all this uncertainty. It's allowing for a tremendous acceleration in the investment in artificial intelligence. 68% of those surveyed expect artificial intelligence to really become commercially disruptive within the next year, which is up sharply from 45% in the survey just 6 months ago that was done back in April. But only 40% actually expect AI's productivity impact, which is really what we're looking for, to materialize in the same time frame within the next year.
That is a remarkable figure, isn't it? Let's repeat that. In April of this year, 45% of these chief economists surveyed said they expected artificial intelligence to become commercially disruptive. I might ask you what we might mean by that in a moment. That number has gone up from 45 now to 68%, almost 70%. It's going to become commercially disruptive. Into what time frame? Within the next year. What do they actually mean by that if it's not gradual increases in productivity? What do they mean by commercially disruptive, do you think?
Yeah, you know, so you look at what has happened with our AI, Gen AI so far. I mean, a lot of it has been basically assistive, providing summaries of meeting notes, you know, summarizing articles, helping in scheduling. These are all assistive type things, which are certainly pretty beneficial, of course, overall. But as I like to say, if you have saved time as a result of Copilot, for example, or any Gen AI product, summarizing a meeting that you just have, well, that's great. Well, what did you do with that extra time that you saved? Did you shop online? At work? Well, you can see that would be hardly a productivity enhancing type of function. So businesses are going to have to figure this out. They're going to have to figure out how to redesign their systems, and that's not easy. But interestingly, you know, we've seen a lot of new companies starting to form, which are being built from the ground up with AI. I'm not just talking about AI providing benefits to their end product. I'm talking about the entire ecosystem underneath, HR, payroll, payables, etc. All of this being developed with AI. When you do it from the ground up, a small business, those small businesses, the lifeblood of any economy, when they do that, then big companies can start to look at them and say, well, I'm going to buy one of those companies and try to incorporate that into our overall mode of working. So that's where it really becomes much more commercially disruptive when you can actually start changing those. But I will be honest, and certainly as we've seen from the evidence from the survey, not too many think that that's going to happen right away. That's several years out, 2 to 5 years easily.
Right. And this word disruptive used to have a very negative connotations. Now it's generally meant to mean more positive things, isn't it? Innovation. Do you think that disruption will have a net positive impact on economies? Or is it, as you said, yes, perhaps, but in 3, 4, 5 years?
Yeah, I think it's going to take some time. It's going to take companies to figure out how to make this work and how to really prove that they can actually advance things. And we're in that learning phase right now, that growth phase. If you want to talk about an S-shaped curve, we're at the very bottom of the start of this ramp up. And so we're going to have to see how people are doing it. One of the big challenges that I see with AI and Gen AI really, or just broadly just say artificial intelligence, is that you don't know what you don't know. You don't know that you can have it do these different things, but you also have to go back and be cautious right now because of hallucination or the fact that some of the information may be wrong. And so we're going to have proper checks and balances. All that takes time. And just imagine getting all of that through your legal department, your ethics group, all of the various groups of large companies and even governments to be able to get them to the point of feeling comfortable that this can provide a doable service that would truly be disruptive in those commercial enterprises.
But as we say, some 70% think that disruption's really going to happen in the next 12 months. So it's quite exciting, in some ways daunting, perhaps. Let's move on to the second theme, Wayne, that you've identified in these notes you've sent to me. Regional divergence. So we talk about the global economy. It's never easy. It's not one economy, is it? It's lots of economies that interact. This latest chief economist outlook says there's a lot of regional divergence. What are you reading into that?
If we look back in the past, the world became very globalized. We all talk about the concepts of globalization, comparative advantage, various economic terms to say, let's build things in areas that have advantages, either because of labor cost or capital or natural resources, etc. But all of a sudden, and that's what's fascinating in this particular survey that's starting to be uncovered in a big way, things are really starting to change. They're changing because when we start to look at the global story, there are a lot of differences in the regionals areas that we see. After COVID, for example, everybody started to lower their interest rates, as an example. There was a globalized change. If you look at all of the central banks around the world, it was something like 61 out of 63 central banks dropped their interest rates almost simultaneously. But we're in a different mode now. And some economies are starting to pick up a little faster or have recognized inflations or seen inflation a little earlier. And that has caused them to start to raise their interest rates earlier than other parts of the world. In the United States, the optimism that we've seen has certainly ticked up. 49% really moderate growth, up from 22% in April. So I guess that's a level of optimism. Things are looking a little bit better. But again, I think it gets back to, Robin, the sensitivity or the uncertainty factor that maybe there's a little bit more certainty starting to creep in now that's allowing people to understand the ways of the road. Natural majority, 52% of the economists that spoke still anticipate weak or very weak growth. So we're not in for a mode of breakout levels of growth in the United States. It's going to be basically back to the potential growth rate of the U.S. economy because of the size of the labor force, which is around 2% or so. Inflation risks, of course, with tariffs remain elevated, and about 60% or so expect higher levels of inflation to really creep through. Let's look at Europe for a moment. It's a bit steadier. 60% of the economists expect moderate or strong growth, and inflation pressures to remain relatively subdued. The potential growth of the European economy, again, based on the size of the labor force, which is a key factor in determining the potential growth rate of an economy, is about 1.4%. So they're already at lower levels than, say, the United States, and we expect to see similar levels of growth as we go forward. Now, China stands out for growth. 71% of the economists surveyed expect moderate or stronger growth. But inflation is really at the opposite extreme. 55% expect low inflation and 38% very low. In fact, recent reports that have come out even after this survey that has occurred, that I just looked at, indicate that deflation is starting to creep into certain goods. That's something we haven't seen in a while. Now, if we look at that regional divergence, the Middle East and North Africa, the MENA countries, really are emerging as a region with the strongest growth outlook. Of the economists that have been surveyed, 37% expect strong or very strong growth, up from just 22% to say in April. That's a pretty notable change. And we're talking in the words strong or very strong levels of growth. For this region, a lot has changed since the last survey. There has been a tremendous amount of growth in tourism, for example, not only intra-tourism within that region, but many people coming into that region also for tourism. Why? It's become much easier. They have created a visa system that allows for people to cross borders or come into the country, basically signing up online and paying a small fee. That type of process of removing friction from the overall process of traveling is making it much more easy to travel within that region, and boy, the numbers really show that. So that is also helping to strong or very strong growth. And finally, sub-Saharan Africa and really South Asia has a lot of untapped potential. So this divergence happening across many of the advanced economies and even amongst the advanced economies, but also the advanced versus the developing economies. As one respondent to the survey noted, this regional divergence is really become the new reality. Each economy is really going to chart its own course as they look through the fog.
Let's go back to disruption, which we mentioned at the start. A lot of it related to trade. And I've noticed in the report also that economists don't see this as a temporary thing. This kind of trade disruption and uncertainty is kind of embedded, institutionalized now. But what can you tell us about how this disruption is playing out across various geographic areas?
Yeah, I think if we look in the past, disruption could often occur within a local region or economy based on politics, based on weather, based on all kinds of factors, investment, capital investments, and even labor supply. All of those things have created challenges, I think, within each region at different times. But now all of a sudden, disruption really isn't isolated. It's very much interconnected, and we're seeing it become much more persistent. In the areas of trade that you mentioned, 70% rate, the level of disturbance is frankly very high. Which isn't positive again. That gets back to the uncertainty factor. 63% expect trade disruption to last for the long term. We're in a new norm about disruption and having to live in disruption levels across these different economies. One of those factors that's really causing, Robin, a lot of these disruption that we're seeing is in technology. From the survey, 69% see high or very high disruption, with 3/4 of them expecting it to persist. Natural resources, the environment, again, 61% rate disruption is high or very high. And again, 78% expect it to persist. So we're seeing very large numbers of factors like trade, like technology, and natural resources. We also look at the global economic institutions. 72% see high or very high disruption here, warning of a lasting scars if these institutions start to weaken. And given the state of affairs that we have seen for quite some time, that's certainly potential. There was a chief economist that warned environmental risks remain deeply underestimated. And we can see that systemic spillovers are really going to be potentially inevitable. So these are areas across the disruption, across each of these regions that are really starting to come into view, and we're going to have to start planning for them in a much bigger way. Start thinking through what that disruption looks like. And we've already seen some of that, right? Going from globalization to now we call regionalization. Each region may have a better chance of managing the trade within that region in looking at the types of technology that are available in that region and using them to the biggest point possible. They know what their natural resources are and they know what they don't have. And so they can start to determine that also. And I think maybe we'll see a little bit more advancement in terms of climate issues, environmental issues, because it will impact that region. It's pretty easy to run a factory that's pumping out a lot of smoke in one region when other regions are very mindful of that type of pollution or disruption that can be caused from it. So we'll have to see how that impacts across the individual regions as opposed to this concept of globalization as we move forward.
Let's talk about economic growth again and what is going to drive that. We've seen across the board expectations for subdued economic growth with some geographical exceptions. Different things will drive economic growth in different areas. Tell us something about that.
Yeah, I think the survey pointed out kind of almost a divergence in the pathways of these growth drivers across the regions. And there's some various reasons behind that. But, you know, the advanced economies, for example, they're certainly leaning in very heavy into technology and to the extent possible, human capital. So they're making large investments in AI. We certainly see that very, very rapid increases, billions and billions and hundreds of billions of dollars in those areas because they don't want to get left behind. The survey showed that 87% expect growth in advanced economies to depend more on technology and, frankly, the know-how. You know, they've got a lot of people who've got to train, but even the technologists have to figure out that know-how of how to create the tools that would actually be impactful. 82% of the survey participants highlight skills and talent going to be the next big thing. So we're going to have to start devoting even more to education. How do you use these tools? What are they about? How can I use and exploit them further in terms of, frankly, becoming more productive? And we think about the skills and the talents, you know, demographics plays in here. Many of the advanced economies, I'm sorry to say, we're getting older. And we have to be thinking about the fact in those demographics that, you know, we're going to start moving from a support system where we have fewer people supporting those people that are older. That's all going to create some challenges also. So that's highlighting the skills and the talent of what's needed and being able to use the tools and technology that we have as things move forward. On the other hand, for developing economies, over 93%, almost everybody thought that capital is going to be the critical input. 82% point to resources and energy. And here's some good news. You know, I think a lot of companies are trying to determine where to invest, where they should move next. I think there was a lot of consideration for the past, which, you know, have been coined things like factory China. Many items are produced in China. I think that's now started to shift to considerations for factory Africa. Tremendous amounts of people that are available, good resources. But there's still some things that need to be provided, especially capital. So in many of the developing economies, capital is going to be that critical input. Now, further to this, in terms of the diverging pathways, trade openness is going to be very important. You know, the ability to trade. We looked at Latin America, for example, and a tremendous amount of growth opportunities can occur just through cross-border trade within their own region. A lot of their trade currently is with regions outside of their own. And because of the resources that are available throughout Latin America, we could see some pretty big improvements there in the area of trade openness. Skills development, training, and innovation, and the capacity to innovate are really a lot of the top growth drivers. But there are some inhibitors. And unfortunately, they are large. You know, political instability. 68% of the survey respondents said political instability and fragmentations of societies as potentially greater threats for the advanced economies. And 58% cited that weak institutions as the top constraint for many of those developing economies.
Could I just ask you on debt as well, public debt? One quote from the Chief Economist Outlook says, debt vulnerabilities, once largely associated with emerging economies, are increasingly centered in advanced ones. 80% of the people questioned, expect risks in advanced economies related to debt to grow in the year ahead. How do you see the issue of public debt? Is this something that policymakers are actually finally going to grapple with? It's something that's often kicked into the long grass.
Yeah, I'd love to see them start to grapple with it sooner. It has been growing dramatically. If we look at the debt that has been taken on in almost every country as a result of COVID, it put us at a new bar. We kind of reset the framework for debt. And even in many economies that had very little debt or just a moderate amount, they've even accelerated also. This creates all kinds of challenges, right? We just have to move in a direction that allows us to right-size our amount of debt. The challenge, of course, is policymakers have to make some very difficult decisions. Are they going to provide the support for their own economies and their own people? Or are they going to work to pay down this debt so that areas like long-term interest rates don't become problematic? You know, I remember my kids getting very excited during COVID when they received these COVID checks that came, you know, the additional monies that came. And they said, boy, look how great this is. I got a $1,300 check and I'm going to go do such and such with it. And as an economist dad, I said to them, well, just be careful what you wish for, because this is going to add to the overall levels of indebtedness. Well, just several years later, they were both looking for houses, and the interest rates in the United States, mortgage interest rates have just skyrocketed, and we don't expect them to be lower anytime soon. Our forecast with our economics team suggests that we're not going to see a 5% mortgage rate. And dare I say, ever. Okay, if there's some massive challenge, health disruption, nuclear explosion, but I mean, really, we have taken on so much debt in the United States and many other economies. The ability to have lower interest rates because of the cost of servicing that debt are going to be very widespread over time. And that's something we're going to have to pay for. So we're either going to have to start figuring out how to manage it better, which is not going to be something that's very favorable because it's painful. Hey, we all know when we have debt and, you know, I don't have extra money to be able to buy something else that comes up, or my car breaks down, whatever the issue is. It can be quite challenging overall to be able to right-size that. But we're going to have to make those tough decisions really globally to start to reduce that debt in order for the economy to continue to grow and prosper in the future.
We're coming towards the end of the time we have, Wayne. How would you summarize the outlook now, having read this report? There'll be another one in a few months' time. It's amazing how some of these figures have changed just since the last one in April. You know, how would you sum up where we're at right now?
Yeah, let's land this. I mean, there's a lot of information in the report, a lot of nuances. And I think if you look at it in total, we're kind of moving from kind of episodic shocks to more of a new operating regime, you know, one that is defined now by persistent disruption. And that's a critical word here, persistent. This disruption is not going to end. And the economists said exactly that. And further to that, that's going to create wider divergence across countries, across regions, and in some cases, even across industries. However, the survey has been pretty clear. And in terms of direction, risks are skewed to the downside. Most expect weaker global growth. But importantly, we're not saying there's a recession. Just we're going to have to start recalibrating ourselves to the potential growth rates, certainly in the advanced economies, and what capital and human talent we can have in the developing countries to allow them to grow. In the new design, if you will, the fragmentation is redrawing trade maps. And even supply chains, which we really haven't spoken a lot about, has really started to become very divergent. As I said, sometimes very regionalized as opposed to globalized, which is a big shift from what we've seen even over from a couple of years ago. Companies and economies, they're going to need to react. And they're going to have to move rapidly to stay ahead of these changes that are happening overall. And there's a lot of depth here. AI disruption, as we talked about, is near term. And as I said, so far it's been mostly just assistive, helping you out. But longer term, it's going to have to be focused on productivity and automation. I mentioned the challenges that we have with demographics in many advanced economies. We're just not going to have as many workers. And the economy can't grow at a pace unless we have those workers, or improvements in productivity. You know, it's interesting, AI might be coming at just the right time so that we can focus on productivity overall. And finally, divergence. I did touch upon that, but more than half of the economists expect gaps to widen between these advanced and developing economies. And that's a little bit of a concern here. Reduced development aid, the aid specifically, is expected by 2/3. And that's going to amplify the split, while 85% warn of global health risks being higher. So what should we do? You know, what's on our dashboard? What's on your dashboard? What should be on your dashboard for the next couple of quarters? Let's talk about that. You know, depending on the region, the U.S. is going to tilt towards additional rate cuts. 85% expect loosening. There's an elevated inflation risk caused by tariffs. 59% certainly see that. But remember, tariffs are a one-time price step change. It's not a systemic challenge within the economy of, frankly, too many dollars chasing too few goods. It is going to create some challenges for a slower job market, though. Europe is certainly steadier. China leans expansionary, but they do have some deflation concerns. If we look at trade and the heat map of trade, 70% of the economists said rate trade disruption is very high. And many expect it, almost 2/3 expect it to be long-lived. You got to assume that these supply chains are going to keep realigning. They're going to take the time to figure out the right size and the right trading partners that they're going to need to have to make this successful. The AI execution gap, you know, commercial pilots in using AI are growing, and people are starting to scale them. I mean, just in the last 3 to 4 to 5 months, it's certainly become very clear that you got to get on the AI bandwagon as quickly as you can. But productivity are going to be the proof points of this, and we certainly see those lagging as we described earlier. Be sure to resource your adoption plans accordingly. Make sure that you're looking at the number of people in your company that are even using these tools, and start to set some new incentives or new goals specifically related to those. And then finally, I would say the opportunity side. Don't miss the upside that's happening in MENA, Middle East and North Africa, the strongest growth sentiment that we saw overall, and the longer run potential flags that we see in sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, and Latin America. All of these, if, and I will say again, if financing and governance start to align. Now, here's the bottom line. The contour of the economy certainly isn't fixed yet. It's multi-changing, and we've seen the changes that have happened and occurred over the last 6-9 months, which is very surprising to have a global economy shift in this fashion, as indicated by this survey. That risk, it allows us room to still maneuver. We can still decide what is best for our companies, our countries, and our industries. Prioritizing optionality over precision is going to happen. You're going to have to be flexible about how you adapt in this new environment. Resilience overreach is going to be something that's going to have to be looked at. And certainly partnerships, back again to getting people to talk and work together. The partnerships that cross borders, even as those same borders, what it would appear to me, they're starting to harden. They're getting more difficult in many cases. As one of the chief economists reflected, we're not just weathering storms now. We got to start redrawing the map. So let's make sure we're the ones holding the pen. Stay tuned, stay adaptive. Let's keep turning uncertainty into our advantage.
Right. So that's kind of where there's crisis, there's opportunity. I suppose where there's great change, there's risk, but there's also opportunity. Wonderful. Wayne Best of Visa, thanks very much for joining us on Radio Davos.
Pleasure to be here.
When the superpowers move, the ground shifts. Power isn't just about might anymore. It's about narratives, networks, negotiation. We go beyond the noise to deliver laser-focused analysis on how power moves and what it means for the world. This is AWANI International, reporting the shifts in power affairs shaping the world.
Di dalam setiap berita yang dibawa, konteks amat penting. Kami sentiasa membawakan yang tergempar dan terkini. Pastikan Astro AWANI menjadi pilihan anda, tidak kira di mana sahaja anda berada.